Well, you are listening to the Meeting House on Faith Radio, coming to you from the International Christian Retail Show in St. Louis at the America Center. Faith Radio and the Meeting House with our conversation outside the exhibit hall. And we've had numerous conversations throughout the course of our time here at the ICRS show for 2013. Sarah Kovac is joining me today. She has stopped by our booth. She is the author of a forthcoming book called In Capable Arms, Living a Life Embraced by Grace. And I tell you what, I guess, Sarah, people may be familiar with your story. You were featured in national media. It was about a disabled mother who cared for her baby with her feet. There was really a lot of media, a lot of attention. That person was you.
Right.
You have a rare congenital birth defect, and you've really been an inspiration to so many people. Thank you for stopping by.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, tell us about some people might say the physical limitation. And I'll just tell you, I was just amazed to sit here and watch you put on a pair of headphones. And even though some people might say, well, there's some limitations there, but you apparently don't let the physical limitations hold you back. So tell us just a bit about the condition, if you will, and just how you began to take steps to not let that hold you back.
Sure. Well, the name of my disability is called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, which is a real mouthful, but basically it just means
AMC.
AMC
also.
is
Okay.
a lot easier
we'll go
to
with
say.
AMC. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
But basically it just means that I was born with a few of my joints stiffened and my muscles weren't working like they should for some reason or another. And in my mother's womb, when I was developing, I didn't move around like I should have. So some things didn't develop right in my arms and shoulders and fingers. So that pretty much limits what I'm doing with my hands, and I have to do a lot of things with my feet instead, especially if it requires dexterity. And looking at my life, I could see how you might think that I don't let anything stop me, but the reality is that I do have limits, and there are plenty of things that I would love to do and can't. But the important things, following Christ and having a fulfilled life and having purpose, those don't really depend on what I'm physically able to do. So in a sense, yes, there are things that I'm limited, but not the important things.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about life growing up and really how you acquired some of the skills to be able to, do things differently than some other folks.
Well, when I was about 2 years old, I just, I don't know if it was a fork or crayons or something, but I just picked it up with my feet and started doing things with my feet. I had gone to occupational therapy, or maybe it was later that I did that, but they tried to encourage me to do things with my hands, but I just knew for me that wasn't going to be how it worked, and I'm very stubborn, so I was determined to do things my own way, and just over time sort of taught myself how to, I drive with my feet and write and type and everything, that you can imagine. I pretty much do that with my feet, and it was sort of a self-taught sort of thing.
Yes, so would you be considered a strong-willed child?
I was a good kid. I was an obedient kid, but when it came to things like how I did things, I knew I needed to find my own way. So, I guess so.
Well, let's talk, of course, as you went through school, as you grew up, of course, as you became an adult, you got married, you had a baby. Talk about really how God worked in your life, even in the midst of some of these limitations.
Well, I think in the limitations is where I see him the most.
Yeah.
And I think because I am limited in some ways that I have to rely on him more, and that was a really difficult thing for me to learn to do, especially because I was so strong-willed and I wanted to think that I was independent and could do everything on my own. But, that's not a good approach for anybody to take, disability or not. We all need each other.
Yeah.
So that was a real growing process for me to come to that place where I can ask for help. And having a baby was really helped that process along, because this was all new territory to me. And, we're about to have another baby in August, so this will be a lot more comfortable this time around. But the first time I didn't know how to do any of it by myself, so a lot of times I did have to ask for help. And so that was a very good thing for me to force me into that position.
Well, Sarah Kovac joining us today here at ICRS 2013 at the America Center in St. Louis. We are in front of the exhibit hall, and we will have more coming up. Well, you are listening to Meeting House here on Faith Radio. Sarah Kovac is the author of the forthcoming book, In Capable Arms, Living a Life Embraced by Grace. And, think about an old song from the 70s that said everybody needs a little help sometimes.
Sure.
And obviously, as you were just sharing earlier, there are limitations. You have really developed an amazing strength and confidence, and you have learned to do a lot of things differently, such as using your feet for some of the different things that require dexterity.
Right.
But what have you learned perhaps about humility and dependence on others as you've come face to face with limitations?
I feel like I've learned a lot recently. Being a parent can be a really humbling experience anyway. But people would approach me or think that I needed help with my child or with my baby, and it took a while for me to get to the place where I wasn't insulted by that, and to realize that even sometimes that is what I need. And I want to teach my kids that. I want to teach my kids that it's okay to have help, and it's okay to say so if you need something. And that's not something that comes naturally to me, but I'm learning that, and humility is a big part of that lesson. I think, we like to believe we can handle it all, but we can't. And that's a lot of what my book is about.
Do you encounter frustration frequently?
Yes. It's always the little everyday things that you wouldn't, that you just wouldn't think about. Like, I'm thirsty and I can't sit down anywhere to have a drink. I have to sit down to do things. It's little things like that just really frustrate me throughout the day. But what are you going to do? We all have frustrations, I think.
I tell you what, and it's those little things. And sometimes if you have a number of little things, they kind of build up throughout the day, and you just get this general attitude of just being just frustrated.
Sure.
Just that, kind of, even if you allow it to continue, you go to your wit's end, and it's just, it becomes a struggle for all of us. What have you found as far as just appropriating God's resources in those times where you're feeling, especially frustrated?
Well, I believe that there's grace for those moments, and I think that, feelings are just feelings, and if I'm frustrated or angry, I try to just, I let myself feel that, but I ask God's grace to act appropriately, even though I might be feeling something, and to not try to shut that away, but to know that, there's nothing about my frustration or anger that he can't handle, and I can take that to him no matter what, and he's not intimidated by my feelings, so I try to just take it to him and trust him with it, and trust that I'm not going to be too much for him, and I'm not going to fail too big for him to handle. So.
Well, and I understand as you've been in this process of writing In Capable Arms and really discovering more about your relationship with Christ, you maybe have come to a greater realization of God's purpose for your life and for your disability. What have you discovered?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard not to go through your life without asking God why, the frustrating and bad things happen. And I've been asking that for a while, and now that I've learned to be a little more vulnerable about it and a little more humble with it, I've seen how magnificently God can use even the parts of us that we hate, even the parts of us that aren't right. And I don't feel like God made me like this, but I know that if I surrender it to him, he can even use that for his good, which is incredibly encouraging. And I think that's the case for anybody. We all have those parts of our heart or our emotions or our personality that maybe we aren't proud of, or what maybe we have a hard time with, or we're broken in some way. And, God can use anything if we put it out there for him to use.
Well, there's such an emphasis these days with the images that we see in media, communication sources, image, self-worth, definition of beauty. There's just, there is just an increasing pressure, it seems like, in our culture to be perfect.
Sure.
So do you deal with that at all in the book?
I've got a whole chapter on that.
A whole chapter? Yeah, so give us a little snippet.
Sure. Well, the chapter, I titled it Perfection versus Beauty. And I even talked about, in Genesis, how God created everything and he said it was good. And the original language there speaks to aesthetics, that things were aesthetically pleasing. The Bible said the Bible didn't say that he created a perfect world. He created a good world that's beautiful. And I don't think those two things are synonymous, because our ideas of perfection, I don't think, really have anything to do with beauty. There are the most beautiful things in the world, the flowers and the pieces of art and things like that, that there's no really way to define perfection when it comes to a creation. And I don't think really probably there is perfection in creation. I mean, everything's just unique. So I don't think it's fair to hold ourselves up to some sort of standard, whether it's external or internal, of believing that we need to be perfect, because that's not even what we're created for.
Sarah Kovac joining us today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. An amazing story and a wonderful attitude. Sarah's joining us here at ICRS 2013. We'll wrap things up here in the next few moments. This is the Meeting House on Faith Radio, St. Louis at the International Christian Retail Show. Sarah Kovac is joining us today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. And I'm very curious, obviously in the process of writing the book that will be released later this year called Incapable Arms, Living a Life Embraced by Grace. The physical writing process for you, as you mentioned that you do quite a bit with your feet due to some limitations in your arms. How's the writing process for you? How does that work?
Tedious.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I do type with my feet, and I'll type about 35 words a minute. So,
oh my goodness.
I mean,
awesome.
I can get by, but it is a little bit difficult physically, just because I have to have my feet up on the desk, and so after a while of doing that, my back hurts, and
sure.
It's not how the body was really meant to sit. So, I had to do it in very small chunks at a time. And I mean, it worked well for me. That was fine. But I know some people can sit down and write thousands and thousands of words in a day, and for me, that's just not. I mean, I maybe could pull it off, but I would be really regretting it the next day. So I try to be kind to my body.
How did you come to the conclusion that you really needed to tell your story in a book? I'll shorten the story up. I didn't ever really come to that decision. I was just in a contract essentially, and I had to write it. Okay.
But it was a really amazing God story how it got to be that way.
Yeah.
So.
Can you do an abbreviated version?
I can abbreviate.
Sure, wonderful.
Yes, I won a contest that sent me to a speakers and writers conference where I inadvertently signed up for a meeting with an agent, and 2 weeks before the conference, I came up with the idea for my book, wrote the proposal, put the sample chapters together, went there, she signed me, then she got me a publisher, and then I had to write the rest of the book. So it was pretty amazing.
Well, I understand that you do work in the area of advocacy for disabled parents. Talk about that work.
Well, I mean, I'm just sort of getting into that, and it's really been harrowing for me to see the things in the news lately about people with disabilities that have their kids taken away just because somebody doesn't understand. They don't think that person would be a capable parent, and I think it's horrible. And for a person without a disability, we assume that they're going to be capable until they prove otherwise. And for a parent with a disability, it doesn't seem to be that way. You look at me and assume about the things that I can't do, and I have to prove to you that I can. And I think that's really unfair that we have to fight that uphill battle.
Yeah, it's kind of a guilty until proven innocent sort of thing, and it should be ideally the opposite way.
Exactly.
So what do people need to know as far as relating to or helping people with disabilities?
I've been asked that question before, and I wish I had a blanket answer, because I would like to know that too. I mean, I'll feel uncomfortable sometimes around other people with disabilities, but I mean, the fact is that they're all individuals. I prefer to ask if I need help. I prefer that. But then there are some people that are like, well, I was obviously struggling. Why didn't anybody help me? So I think it's really one of those things where everybody's an individual and everybody has preferences, and some people are introverted and some people are not, and so you have to just take a minute to try to get to know that person. I mean, you can't make a blanket statement that disabled people like this or that, because everybody's different.
Sure, absolutely. So what do you want people to take away from this book?
I want them to be, while we always will strive to be better people, I want them to learn that, as I said before, God's not intimidated by anything we could take to Him, by our imperfections or weaknesses, and that those are even things that He can use and work in magnificent ways to bring purpose into our lives and to help other people. So, to sort of embrace those things that we can't change about ourselves, and be okay with that and accept that as part of who we are, and the things that we can change, to not be afraid to take those to God and let Him work with those too.
Well said. Sarah Kovac joining us today here on the Meeting House. And Sarah, I know people could probably Google you and maybe see some of that video coverage that made the national media, but I'm sure you have a website as well.
I do, and it's sarahkovac.com, Sarah with an H.
All right, sarahkovac.com. Name of the book, In Capable Arms. Sarah, a blessing to meet you and to chat.